Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you here again, assembled. Congratulations for all those students who have already presented. Terrific work, really impressive stuff. Here we, of course, come to the end of this event with the closing plenary session on irregular warfare in the contemporary security environment. I'm very proud and delighted to be moderating this session. We have 5 excellent presentations ahead of us. I'm going to step out of the way because with 5 excellent speakers and I think a lot of curiosity in the room, I'm sure that we'll have a very vibrant question and answer session as well. So all I'm going to do is present to you the speakers and then of course make sure that they don't overrun their 8 minutes, which I'm sure won't happen. So we'll go in the order of the program, which means that we'll start with Samuel Carson from the Defense Intelligence Agency, talking about strategic cooperation between Iran and Russia, implications for U.S. policy. We'll then move on to Commander James Heller of the U.S. Coast Guard, who will speak to the countering China's advance into Oceania. Colonel Christian James Wingmer from the Philippines will speak about safeguarding sovereignty, protecting Philippine territorial integrity in the West Philippine Sea dispute. Colonel Nikolaos Vlastodakis from Greece will speak about countering Turkish irregular warfare activities in the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. And last but not least, we'll have Brigadier General Anton Christopher Vijayasekara from Sri Lanka speaking about strategic counter to the residual liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam threat. A broad, diverse range of topics, all of which have key irregular warfare implications. So I look forward to hearing from them and then hearing from you in the Q&A. Thank you. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Dr. Rucco. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Carson from Seminar 5, also known as the best seminar. Today's presentation, as Dr. Rucco mentioned, is on Iran's burgeoning relationship with Russia and some of the key implications. So before going any further, I wanted to just very quickly provide some context for how this topic fits into the broader focus of my research this year. So my portfolio mainly looked at the growth in Iran's ability to project regional power and influence, especially in the last 5 years, and what has mostly been a sort of failure on the United States' part to counter and contain Iran's most destabilizing activities, despite the significant resource investments we have made and the overwhelming advantage that the United States enjoys in especially conventional military capabilities. So what I have found is that Iran's growing power projection capabilities are mainly the result of 3 things, each of which were the focus of my research papers and my irregular warfare strategy this year, that I'm happy to get into more detail during the question and answer session. So first, despite decades of crippling sanctions, Iran now boasts one of the most highly capable and technically advanced militaries across the Middle East. It holds the largest arsenal of accurate ballistic missiles in the region, and the UAVs that it's developed have been involved in hundreds, if not thousands, of attacks against U.S. forces and our partners in the region. Second, Iran is now bearing the fruits of a project begun under former IRGC Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani to develop a highly capable network of partners and proxies that it refers to as its axis of resistance. Iran is proliferating increasingly advanced weapons to these groups, providing it with the ability to attack and confront its adversaries with greater lethality, precision, across greater distances and from more directions than really at any other point in the Islamic Republic's history. And then finally, and this will be the focus of the rest of this presentation, Iran has been greatly invested in expanding both overt and clandestine cooperation with key U.S. adversaries, especially Russia and China, as a way to counter its own sense of international isolation, as well as confronting U.S. influence and legitimacy worldwide. So turning to the topic at hand, my research on the Iran-Russia relationship was mainly focused on 3 overarching questions. First, what is the trajectory of the relationship? Is it, as several U.S. policymakers have described, evolving into sort of a strategic alliance similar to a lot of the key partnerships that the United States enjoys with key allies. Second, while those same U.S. officials have been very vocal about the types of cooperation that's occurring, what is less clear and what I wanted to focus on is what tangible impact is that cooperation actually having on undermining key U.S. security and policy objectives. And then lastly, while I think any notion that we can sort of break up the alliance or cause a rupture in the relationship is highly unlikely, I wanted to explore what tools, if any, are available to the United States to at least undermine cooperation in the relationship. So before going into my research findings, I just wanted to very quickly provide sort of what the state of play is in the relationship, what types of cooperation we're actually seeing. So I'll just start with cooperation between Iran and Russia has existed since the founding of the Islamic Republic. However, that cooperation historically has been highly transactional in nature, characterized by intense amounts of mistrust on both sides, especially when it comes to Iran. However, especially following Russia's military invasion of Ukraine, we've obviously seen relations between both countries explode in unprecedented ways. While some of that cooperation is overt, like much of Iran's malign activities, it is sought to keep a lot of the cooperation in the shadows, which has greatly complicated U.S. efforts to confront and counter it. Just one example of this, obviously, clandestine military cooperation has probably been the most notable thing that we've seen over the last couple of years. Despite denials by senior Iranian officials, Iran has now transshipped thousands of one-way attack UAVs, artillery, air-to-ground munitions to Russia, and it's also built a UAV production line inside of Russia territory. The map before you just shows some of the clandestine routes that Iran has been using to transship UAVs and other forms of military support to Russia, again highlighting how much the regime is invested in keeping a lot of this support in the shadows. Now turning to my research questions and findings. First, again, what is the overall trajectory of the relationship? What I have found is that while cooperation between both actors is likely going to continue to grow, potentially into new areas, the likelihood of this both countries forming sort of a strategic alliance will continue to be constrained by a number of factors. Just one example, Syria is an arena where both countries have cooperated very closely to prop up the Bashar Assad regime. However, Syria is likely to be an arena of increasing competition between both actors as both look to solidify their long-term military presence in the country, as well as gain greater economic concessions from Damascus. So my second question, again, I wanted to look at sort of what tangible impact this cooperation is having on undermining key U.S. security and policy objectives. I chose to look at four current policy efforts by the U.S. Depicted on the slide here. What I have found is that while cooperation between Iran and Russia is certainly undermining each one of these objectives, the overall net impact of that cooperation in reality is oftentimes far less than what has been portrayed, especially by senior U.S. officials. Just one example of this, both Iran and Russia cooperate very closely on efforts to evade U.S. sanctions, which obviously undercuts a key tool that the U.S. has to punish both actors. However, broader efforts that we've seen to create sort of an alternative financial system between Iran and Russia is in reality much more rhetoric than actual substance, owing especially to the tepid support that China has shown for these types of initiatives. Two potentially worrisome trends that I did identify in the future listed here, just one I'll mention very briefly, and that is the potential, especially that Iran and Russia will begin cooperating more closely on sharing military lessons learned, especially related to tactics, techniques, and procedures. Iran's recent combined drone, ballistic, and cruise missile attack against Israel in April bore many of the exact characteristics of several Russian attacks inside of Ukraine, pointing to the potential sharing of expertise with Iran before this attack took place. Lastly, again, While causing a rupture in the relationship is highly unlikely, I did want to see or provide some recommendations on areas that the U.S. could focus on to at least undermine cooperation in the relationship. One effort that has already seen a lot of results and that the U.S. should continue to do, if not expand, is publicly disclosing any major changes in the relationship, especially any new assistance that Iran is considering providing to Russia. Previous pronouncements by U.S. officials pointing to the imminent delivery of ballistic missiles to Russia in the past played a key role, most likely, in Iran's decision to suspend those deliveries, pointing again to the success of these types of efforts. So with that, I think I'm out of time, and I look forward to any questions.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is James Heller, Commander in the United States Coast Guard. So this is my topic, countering Chinese influence in Oceania. Obviously very relevant since we've done 2 presentations on Oceania. And overall, this is the region. Many of you may not be familiar with it. So I chose this topic because although I have sailed through the Pacific and I've even done a week on board a Philippine Coast Guard cutter of seeing the area, most of my experience and expertise has been in Central and South America doing counter-drug ops and, of course, search and rescue here in the U.S. I really wanted to learn about Oceania and the primary mission for the U.S. Coast Guard there, which is illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. It's a topic very important to the service and the country, and so that's what I wanted to focus on. And of course, my portfolio addresses this topic using multiple elements of national power, but today I'm just going to talk about one narrowly focused element of IUU response. So as you can see here, this is what people refer to as the second island chain. This would be the first island chain coming through the Philippines, and then from Indonesia, going up through Palau and up through Guam and the Marianas. The national security strategy has a 3-pronged approach for countering China. It's to invest in our foundations of strength at home, to align our efforts with our network of allies and partners, and to compete responsibly with the PRC. But very specifically, it says we will act to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So what is IUU fishing? So China, as the world's largest importer of seafood, overfished their own waters and has over the years developed and invested in a distant water fishing fleet that, as you can see here, the quote here from Xi Jinping, build bigger ships and venture even farther into the oceans and catch bigger fish. Pretty specific about what he wants them to do. So the IUU catch is about 32 million tons of fish each year, representing about $30 billion of lost legal trade, and estimates are that about 1 in 5 fish sold throughout the world is potentially illegally caught. They use techniques such as long drift nets, miles long, that catch everything in their path, and fish in territory without authorization, and some of these ships stay at sea for over a year at a time. Overfishing is destabilizing, creates food insecurity, and weakens poorly diversified economies. China's not the only country that does it. Of course, Taiwan comes in second, and South Korea, but China's the most prolific, the most egregious, with potentially 16 to 20,000 fishing ships, or distant water fishing ships, 10 to 15 times more than the next highest. And of course, they have paramilitary forces embedded within their distant water fleet, the Chinese maritime militia, which of course they use to enforce their foreign policy. And so specifically, China subsidizes the fuel for this fleet, and they look the other way when their catch is brought to the pier. So it seems bad, but why do we care? So ultimately, this is all about Taiwan. China would prefer to deny the U.S. access to as much of Oceania as possible. In World War II, these islands were used integrally for the leapfrog campaign. Of course, today, with modern technology, you could say that leapfrogging is no longer necessary with the range of our ships and aircraft, which is true. However, the first and second island chain here, and some people refer to these islands as the island cloud, offer forced dispersal options in the event of actual attack and fighting. So we want to be there. In addition to BRI, which we're all familiar with and kind of is throughout the whole region, some specific advances for China are in the Solomons, where they have a mutual defense pact giving Chinese military access to their ports and waters. In Fiji, there's agreements to allow the Chinese distant water fleet to make port. And in Kiribati, there is currently an attempt to refurbish, again, a World War II runway to lengthen it, and that would give China potentially the ability to put bombers within 1,800 miles of Hawaii. Moving on. So, what do we have right now? Great picture. Kind of makes you want to join the Coast Guard. At least I think so. These ships should look familiar. This is what we all went on board in Key West. So we've got 4 of these in Guam, and as a collateral duty, they patrol Oceania, an area of about 10 million square miles of exclusive economic zone, roughly about the size of the continent of Africa. So, as you can imagine, not quite enough. These ships are relatively small. They can only stay underway for about a week. And the distances are so great, they pretty much need to go from port to port to refuel without getting much actual patrolling in. So what should we do about it? So this is a new class of Coast Guard cutter that's currently being built. The offshore patrol cutter, crew of 126 people, range of 10,500 miles, endurance of 60 days without underway replenishment. I argue that we should, as home porting decisions aren't finalized, we should put 3 of these in Guam. And we should put 6 additional of the fast response cutters seen in the last slide in Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands, 3 independent nations that we have agreements with, military defense agreements. And we could place these cutters there for pretty inexpensive investment and fulfill some of our requirements for COFA, the cooperation of, it's escaping, freely associated, so we could fulfill our military defense obligations incrementally without building large bases, just integrating into existing ports with our smaller ships. And, again, why Coast Guard cutters? This is part of our mission. U.S. Coast Guard is traditionally seen as less escalatory, often rides that line where military will need to be and law enforcement when it suits us, and often welcome in places that U.S. Navy is not typically invited. For example, I've been on a Coast Guard cutter to a port call in Russia. Of course, that would not happen today, and it was exactly what I thought, covered in snow and rust, but be that as it may. So a visual of the proposed laydown. The ships I mentioned in Guam, these larger cutters, these are the ones that currently are in place, and then Palau, Micronesia, Marshall Islands. And just to give you some kind of understanding of the vastness, so from Hawaii, which currently has our larger cutters, it's 4,800 miles to Palau, which is roughly the distance from Seattle to St. Petersburg, Russia. So still not quite enough, but enough to get our foot in the door and establish a persistent presence. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Colonel Christian James Vigno from the Philippines, also from the mighty Seminar 4 under Commander Scott Douglas. Today, I am honored to present my paper on irregular warfare titled Safeguarding Sovereignty, Protecting Philippine Territorial Integrity in the West Philippine Sea Dispute. The South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea, is a strategic region marked by significant international disputes and overlapping claims from several nations. This situation, especially the confrontation around the hotspots like the Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands, threatens the Philippines' territorial integrity and sovereignty, regional stability, and the rules-based international order, intensified by China's militarization of occupied islands and violation of maritime laws. Central to this tension is the final and legally binding 2016 arbitral ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which invalidated China's 9-line claims under UNCLOS, declaring them legally baseless. The tribunal affirmed that several maritime features claimed by China do not generate an inclusive economic zone or continental shelf, thus invalidating China's expansive claims. It also found that China violated its obligation to protect the marine environment, highlighting the destruction of coral reefs and the harvesting of endangered species. Despite this comprehensive ruling, China rejects the findings and continues to interfere with Philippine maritime activities. This defiance complicates diplomatic efforts and underscores the need for a unified international stance that reflects UNCLOS principles, as China's undermine international law and escalate regional tension. China's strategy in the West Philippine Sea aims for regional hegemony through a combination of political, international, non-violent, and coercive actions. Politically, China engages in diplomatic and cultural diplomacy to build political capital and influence. This includes fostering bilateral and multilateral relationships, promoting Chinese culture through educational exchanges and media, and lobbying in international organizations to align policies with its interests. Internationally, China employs cyber operations to gather sensitive information, disrupt rival activities, and conduct disinformation campaign to manipulate public perception and undermine the credibility of other nations. Economic diplomacy leverages trade, investment, and economic to create independence and influence national policies. Additionally, China engages naive collaborators who supports its agenda, knowingly or unknowingly, to legitimate its claims and policies on the international stage. Nonviolent actions include media warfare, which controls narratives and spreads propaganda to shape public perception, and psychological warfare, which uses intimidation and information manipulation to undermine the morale of rival claimants. Legal warfare involves using international legal platforms to challenge other nations' claims to legitimize China's territorial assertion. Coercive actions involve the harassment of foreign vessels to assert dominance and intimidate other claimants, the militarization of artificial islands to create strategic military outposts that project power and deter other nations, and regular naval and Coast Guard patrols to reinforce China's presence and claims in the region. This action consolidates China's political capital, enhance strategic positioning, shape international narratives, and ultimately aim to achieve regional hegemony. The center of gravity in China's strategy lies in its ability to legitimize and enforce its territorial claims, aiming to enhance its global influence and regional dominance. However, critical vulnerabilities include the international community's non-recognition of these claims following the 2016 arbitral ruling and the potential for escalating tension, which could provoke severe geopolitical reactions. On the other hand, the Philippine strategy in the West Philippine Sea focuses on strategic alliances, diplomatic dialogues, strategic communication, and legal advocacy, as well as the maintenance of a credible defense posture. Strengthening ties with global entities like the ASEAN, the US, the EU, and other like-minded nations is crucial for enforcing our international support base. Managing tension through ongoing international and regional discussion, such as the declaration of the conduct of parties in the South China Sea, helps mitigate conflicts and foster mutual understanding. By leveraging in international legal frameworks, particularly UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitral ruling, the Philippines asserts its territorial claims. Comprehensive communication strategies, including public statement and information campaigns, countered misinformation and build global support, while enhancing military capabilities through modernization, joint exercises and defense agreement with ally and partner nations ensure a credible defense, deterring potential aggression and signaling our readiness to defend our territory. To mitigate risks associated with this strategy, we intensify diplomatic engagement to ensure our actions are seen as a part of a broader peacekeeping effort, rather than provocations. Prioritizing critical defense spending and leveraging partnership allow us to share costs and technology, addressing economic implication without overburdening our resources. By institutionalizing maritime strategies and strengthening international treaties, we aim to ensure continuity and stability in our policies, regardless of political transitions. Maintaining a consistent and effective approach to safeguard our national interests. This comprehensive approach aims to transition from conflict to peaceful resolution, maintaining our territorial integrity and sovereignty, contributing to regional stability and the observance of international law and the current world order. That ends my presentation. I welcome any questions you might have regarding our efforts in strategy. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nikolaos Vlastoudakis, Colonel from Seminar 3. I see two representatives here today for the closing plenary, me and James. So, not bad, I think. Ops Director of the Joint Special Operation Command in Greece, and I will present my irregular warfare plan, which is countering Turkish irregular warfare activities in the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. My overall portfolio is titled Securing Greece, Challenges from Turkey, China, and EU Expansion, and consists of the projected papers. The four documents collectively offer a thorough analysis of Greece's security landscape, addressing specific regional threats as Turkish irregular warfare in Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, and evaluating broader geopolitical dynamics as China's influence and the implications of Turkey's potential EU accession. Additionally, the proposed new Hellenic national security strategy outlines policy framework that integrates these diverse challenges and opportunities, aiming to enhance Greece's overall security posture. The problem statement: Greece faces significant security threats in the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean caused by Turkey's irregular warfare activities. Applying its strategic depth and blue homeland doctrine, Turkey is aggressively trying to establish itself as the leading regional power and primary energy regulator in the Eastern Mediterranean. Using military capabilities and indirect asymmetric approaches, Turkey has challenged Greece in sovereign oil, mineral, and fishing rights in Greek territorial seas. Ignoring international treaties, Turkey has exploited social vulnerabilities, weaponized information, and used various methods of attack along political, non-violent, and violent lines of effort. This pressure campaign, if left unchecked, could quickly erupt into violence, endangering both countries and the cohesion of the southeastern flank of NATO. The strategic approach is deterrence through direct and indirect means, overt and covert actions, enhancing dime-fill levels of national power, and using government agencies, media, civil society, and NGOs. The theory of success is to implement and leverage international law, and specifically UNCLOS, to discredit Turkey and defend Greek sovereignty. The end state is defend Greece's maritime sovereignty, always in accordance with international law. My strategic response is divided into three phases. I will have a brief description of these three phases. The first is strategic communication and strengthening. This phase will shift the narrative in Greece, communicate to its population and international audiences the chance from appeasement to deterrence. The phase will concentrate on communicating the government's pro-Greek and not anti-Turkish strategy, ensuring domestic and international support by adhering to international law, exposing Turkish actions through information operations, and presenting Greece as the sole reliable partner in the Eastern Mediterranean. All the above, along with the continuous monitoring of the 2030 armament program and optimizing the Greek armed forces to reduce response times in the exclusive economic zone. The objective is to shape the strategic landscape and establish favorable circumstances for the transition to the deterrence phase. The second phase will focus on targeting critical vulnerabilities and Turkey's center of gravity, which is its government's legitimacy. All actions in this phase are in alignment to undermine Turkey's will and capacity to respond to Greece's declaration of exclusive economic zone and expansion of territorial waters by initiating an armed conflict as per the 1995 National Assembly resolution. This will cause a blow to Turkey's credibility, undermining domestic and international legitimacy. In the third phase, we'll have a long-term prospect. It will address the deepest roots of the problem, promoting a win-win narrative for both sides while solidifying Greece's role in the Eastern Mediterranean as an energy alternative for the European Union. I will now indicatively describe campaigns from the diplomatic and informational and legal lines of effort of all phases. Greece will actively address Turkey's provocations in EU forums, seeking consensus among member states to send a strong message and increase diplomatic pressure on Turkey. Advocating for EU sanctions or other measures in response to aggression, Greece aims to incentivize Turkey to adhere to international law and maintain good neighbourly relations, prerequisite for EU accession. By highlighting Turkey's stance in the Russia-Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas wars, and drawing parallels to its actions in the Eastern Mediterranean with China's activities in the South China Sea, Greece seeks to underscore Turkey's revisionist behavior. An information campaign will highlight that Turkey's maritime actions not only jeopardize regional stability, but also impact Turkey's prospects for EU ascension. These actions risk diplomatic isolations from EU member states, hinder businesses' growth potential, reduce foreign investment inflows, and most importantly, limit Turkey's access to the world's largest single market. Restrictions on travel or work opportunities could also affect Turkish citizens' ability to pursue educational and employment opportunities abroad. Greece can also sow seeds of doubt about the choice of aggressive military policies, fostering internal debate and dissent within Turkey's already deeply damaged civil-military relations. In the legal line of effort, Greece will negotiate with Turkey a special agreement to decide which differences are to be adjudicated by the International Court of Justice in The Hague or the International Court of the Law of the Sea in Hamburg, and which they will exclude. The jurisdiction of the court will be limited to disputes they agree to submit to it. The negotiation will make efforts to convince Turkey that recourse to the International Court of Justice will benefit its foreign policy and economic interests, resulting in a win-win situation. Concerning the risk and mitigation, the first risk is that Turkey may disregard legal rulings and challenge them through diplomatic or political means, and we will have an escalation. Greece will engage in robust diplomatic efforts to garner support from allies and international organizations. Through coalition and alliances, Greece will exert diplomatic pressure on Turkey to comply with legal rulings and uphold international law, always ready to defend its sovereignty. The second risk is political and economic instability that could produce difficulties implementing and sustaining the 2030 defense plan. An extension of the completion of the plan will mitigate this risk, thereby extending the phase 1 of the implementation. This concludes my presentation, and I will now give the floor to Brigadier General Anton Wedge-Sekera for the last presentation of the day. Thank you.
Chancellor Marsh, distinguished professors, my dear colleagues, I'm Brigadier Anton Wedge-Sekera from Sri Lanka Army, and as the last presenter of the CISA 2024 Research Symposium, I'm pleased to present the findings of my DIW-CIW research. My topic is Sri Lanka, a strategic counter to the residual liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam threat, and this is how I phrased my problem statement. The map that you see here is the map of Sri Lanka, and the area highlighted in red color is the area that's claimed by the Tamils of the north and east of Sri Lanka as the area of their traditional homeland. So the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, an insurgency group in Sri Lanka, fought for 27 years to create a separate state in the north and east of Sri Lanka. However, in 2009, the government forces were able to defeat them on the ground, and since 2009, the Sri Lankan government has been doing a lot of work to bring back peace and harmony in Sri Lanka and to unify the different ethnic groups, especially the Sinhalese and the Tamils. However, as the problem statement says, the government has failed so far. 15 years after defeating the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the government has not been able to bring a solution to this Tamil problem. So if you look at why the government failed, the government has failed to solve the immediate humanitarian and human rights problems of the Tamil people, and also the government has failed to establish a political settlement with the devolution of power for the northern and eastern provinces, and at the same time, the government has failed to address the root causes of the problem, which were the long-standing grievances of the Tamils about discrimination and about inequalities that they have in relation to the facilities that the people in the south has. So this is the theory of success that I propose. As you can see, the theory of success is about uniting various ethnic groups in the country. In my country, most of the time, if you ask a person in my country where he is from, he will say, okay, I'm from Sri Lanka, but I'm a Tamil or a Sinhalese, or they would say, I'm a Muslim, because there is no consensus among the ethnic groups to say that Sri Lankans. There is no Sri Lankan identity among the people in my country. So the biggest challenge for the government is to unite the people, unite everybody, treat everybody equally. Even though there is equality, if you go to the south, there are Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, everybody is living together. But the problem with the north is that the majority in the north and the east are Tamils, and the Tamils do not want any other ethnic groups to come and live in their areas, because they consider the north and east as their traditional homelands, and they are asking for autonomy in the region. So this is the strategy that I'm proposing. My strategy has 5 lines of effort. Out of the 5 lines of effort, my focus is on the first one here, the political line of effort. In that, I'm proposing constitutional reforms to the Sri Lankan constitution. When you talk about the Tamil national problem, the most important thing that is coming up is the 13th amendment to the Sri Lankan constitution. The 13th amendment to the constitution was introduced in 1987 with the intervention of India, and this particular amendment to the constitution created provincial councils in Sri Lanka. Each province got a provincial council, and these provincial councils were given power to control that area, each province, and all the provincial councils were given the powers of education, agriculture, the authority to run education, agriculture, police powers, and other powers, administrative powers. However, the government did not implement the 13th Amendment completely, because the government feared that the people in the north, the Northern Provincial Council, will one day use these powers to secede as a separate state. So then we have to do institutional reforms. By institutional reforms, I mean that we need to do a lot of changes to our legal system. One important thing that we need to reform is the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which was enacted 40 years ago to fight the terrorists. That law is still in operation, and there are a lot of allegations about abusing that law by the armed forces and the police. So there is an immediate requirement to reform and revise this law. And then the third most important point for me to stress here is the international line of effort that is totally focused on the Tamil diaspora that is living in the West. So I'm proposing to have active engagement with the Tamil diaspora, to get them to discuss with the government, to get investments from the Tamil diaspora to the north and east, to get Tamil diaspora to come to the north and east, and to help the Tamil people out with the blessings of the government. So in implementing this strategy, I have identified certain risks. The two most important risks: the first one, loss of political support for the strategy. I mean, when you're going to implement this strategy, there will be a lot of resistance from the Sinhalese, nationalist entities, and even the Tamils will resist against this, because there are certain Tamils who do not like the support of the diaspora. Then the last risk, the support of the Indian government, is very, very crucial, because any amendment to the 13th, any changes to the 13th Amendment is going to be resisted by India, because the 13th Amendment was brought or introduced with the intervention of India. So finally, I have 3 recommendations. The first recommendation is to revise the Prevention of Terrorism Act. That is one thing that we have to do immediately. The second recommendation is to review and rectify the 13th Amendment to suit the present situation, and to try and give more powers to the provincial councils, so that the Tamil people of the north and east will have some kind of autonomy short of separation. And then lastly, I have a recommendation that says to engage with the Tamil diaspora and to get the support of the Tamil diaspora to solve the issue of the Tamils. With that, ladies and gentlemen, my presentation comes to an end. If you have any questions, please save them for the gray zone.
Well, I promised 5 excellent presentations, and I don't think we were disappointed. To the contrary, we now pass to the next phase of this proceeding, where we will hear from our excellent discussants here, Ambassador John Hoover and Dr. Dana Barnes. They will quiz our speakers here, and after they have responded to their satisfaction, we will then open it up for Q&A to involve everyone. So just hold steady for a little while, and I'll call upon you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes? Wonderful. Okay, so thank you to all the members of the panel for these excellent presentations. I've had the pleasure of working with many of you on the panel, the majority even, for the course of the year. And so it has been wonderful to hear this final result as I've gotten to watch these projects develop. I will ask one question to 3 of the speakers and then pass on to my distinguished counterpart for the remaining 2 questions. So my first question is to Sam, which is this. In your presentation, you talk about the nature of the relationship between Russia and Iran as being historically, you said, transactional and marked by mistrust. And even though you make the argument that that relationship has become more active in the last 5 years, my question is, would you say that that characterization holds? Is the relationship at present marked by transactionalism and mistrust? It sounds like your examples of sharing tactics would indicate perhaps not. And if that has changed, does that mean there's been a change in worldviews that's brought these two powers closer in terms of their perspectives? So I'm curious your answer for that. I'll do all of my questions and give you a moment to think about it, but I'm so glad for the enthusiasm. My next question will be to Nicholas, and this is, of course, relating to your question. You mentioned, in terms of your lines of effort, the idea of diplomatically isolating Turkey in its position of expansion to the maritime area. My question is, what kinds of challenges will Greece face in that isolation, in particular because of the strategic value of Turkey to NATO countries, and so the fear of alienation, and the lack of the potential carrot of EU ascension, with that proposal being quite sidelined in the last 10 years. So how do you propose going through an isolation? Yeah? And then my final question is to Anton about, of course, the Sri Lanka case, and a really fascinating paper. So let's see, for that, I wanted to ask you, and I was so happy to hear in your risk section that you presumed the question that I was going to ask, and yet it still's there, right? Which is when you talked about, in particular, power sharing and addressing some of the original roots of the conflict that led to this crisis. What kind of political will is there, especially for power sharing, in a situation where the political or the violent military conflict between the two sides was so decisively agreed? And you mentioned in risk that was one of the things you were concerned about, but I wonder, how likely is it there will be pushback from leadership for really engaging in this crucial part of your strategy? Thank you.
So I get the two Jameses. But before that, let me just say, great presentations from all five of you. All the presentations I saw this week. Congratulations really to all of you, but really everyone here on the past 10 months of work culminating this week in these great briefings. James Heller. There's a saying, you know, a hammer only sees nails. And your solution to, you know, Chinese encroachment in Oceania was to put more Coast Guard cutters in there because you're a Coast Guard guy. As a diplomat, I would say, hey, we need to use diplomatic steps to try to deal with that, right? Sometimes we're blinded by where we come from, but I do agree with your proposal to put additional hardware out there. But there was kind of a contradiction in what you said. You talked about IUU. It almost sounded like it was an end in and of itself for China. They need the food. They need to produce jobs for the fishermen. But then you sort of said they're doing IUU and Oceania as a way of projecting power, as part of a broader strategy to project power into that part of the world. But then you also said that it tends to alienate countries. So I was wondering if you could touch on that, what I thought was a contradiction. And again, I think if China is alienating the very countries it wants to cultivate to project power in Oceania and other parts of the world, why couldn't it be persuaded to back off of IUU through diplomatic, not pressure, but just maybe a little naming and shaming? And as they have with climate change, they might respond to that because it is damaging their relationships and damaging the environment around the world. James Vigneault. First, thank you for calling that body of water the West Filipino Sea instead of the South China Sea. I like that. I really appreciated that. Maybe we should all use that nomenclature going forward. You had a bullet late in your slideshow that said political transition. And that was going to be my question. And you didn't have time to really elaborate on it, so maybe you can do that. And my question is, in this country, we have political transitions. And as part of those transitions, sometimes our foreign policy direction or the tone of our foreign policy can change pretty radically, as it has over the past 2 administrations. I think that's also happened in the Philippines to some extent. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that risk in the Philippines. Could we go back to a leader in the Philippines who would be less amenable to working with the U.S. and more sympathetic to Chinese interests? That's it.
So I guess I'll start. So thanks for the question, first of all, Dr. Barnes. I'll start by addressing the last part of your question first, since I think it sort of answers all this. So short answer, no, I do not think the worldview of either has necessarily changed. I think both have historically seen each other as sort of useful cudgels against the West. What has changed most dramatically, I think, is the dynamics within the relationship has sort of been turned upside down because of the war in Ukraine. So historically, this has essentially been characterized by sort of a patron-client relationship, with Russia being obviously the patron and Iran just hoping to extract as much as usefulness as they can out of Russia. But it's also led to the sense of betrayal time and time again on the part of Iran especially. So a good example of this is Russia voting for UN sanctions against Iran and for its nuclear program several years ago, something that, again, the sense of betrayal was very, very visceral on the part of Iran's regime. But those dynamics have changed so much because of the war, where it's sort of flipped itself on its head, where Russia's become extremely dependent on especially Iranian support. It's probably its most, Iran has sort of turned itself into probably Russia's most important external military backer, at least. What has not happened, and this sort of goes into sort of this idea of what I tried to bring up in the presentation, that lingering mistrust is probably going to prevent this from evolving into something more. So Iran, for instance, I think there's been an expectation of gaining greater concessions from Russia on a range of issues that it has not so far gotten. I brought up one thing up there in the presentation, but there is a slew of things to include stopping Israel from attacking its positions inside of Syria. I think there's definitely an expectation that it would do that. Military sales is another thing that Iran has been fully expecting from Russia. However, those sales have been delayed for months, if not years now, because of the war. And I think there's a growing sense of frustration probably on the part of the regime that it's not getting everything that it thought it would from the support that it's providing. And I think that's just it's something that's probably going to continue to grow over time. And I also think it's something that the U.S. can probably do a much better job of exploiting to sort of undermine that cooperation. So, thank you.
Dr. Barnes, thank you for your question. Answering the first part of the question, how challenging is the line of effort to isolate Turkey diplomatically? It is challenging, but I think is already taking place because of Turkey's stance in our contemporary challenges, in the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war, and contradiction Greece's stance. So I think that this is why one of the campaigns is to project Greece as the reliable partner in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are many aspects of this. One aspect is that, similar to the Chinese, to James' approach, when you have a revisionist adversary, other countries are aligned together to confront him. This is the case with Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean. We have trilateral, bilateral schemes in order to exploit natural resources from the Eastern Mediterranean. Greece, Israel, Cyprus. Greece, Egypt, Israel, Cyprus. The Eastern Mediterranean gas pipeline now, it's again, after a period of time that it was, let's say, a little bit put away, now it's rewarmed, especially with the need of the European Union for energy dependence from Russia. So an aspect of this is also that Greece from 2020 until now, has the strongest alliance with the United States, updated its MDCA agreement, Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement, updated the same agreement, produced a new agreement with mutual defense clause with France, and let us not forget, it is a deterrent factor as after Brexit, the only nuclear power in the European Union. A mutual agreement with the UAE, also agreement with our friend, some country, Saudi Arabia. We have a Patriot battery there in order to protect from Houthi drone attacks. So, and all the other countries that are against the Muslim Brotherhood, that Turkey is in favor of, Turkey and Qatar. So I think that the partnership right now and the geopolitical landscape right now is in favor of Greece. For the second part of the question, for the European Union ascension that you mentioned, it's, let's say, frozen. I agree, because it's the oldest application that still is frozen. But Greece from 1999 raised the veto and is in favor of EU accession. And to be consistent with all my papers, because my thesis also was about implications of EU accession to the of Turkey's accession to the European Union, the result of my research that was EU accession, both for Turkey and EU, is a means, but not an end. Is a means to gain concessions. Turkey about migration, about visa liberalization, that they are in pursuit of, and other economical concessions, and for the EU for the same reasons, because of the migration issue, because of the commercial reasons and stuff like that. But my strategy is that, and my estimate is that Turkey's interest is inside or with a special relationship with the European Union, because it is of their economic advantage. Even we hear a different rhetoric sometimes, but I think that their interest is this. And that's why I think it's one of the vulnerabilities that Greece needs to exploit. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Barnes. So the question was about power sharing and the willingness of the politicians to share power. So throughout this conflict, power sharing has been the key word. The Tamils were actually asking for autonomy in the north and east regions, but the government or the majority single government never wanted to give total powers to the north and east, because they were mostly asking for a federal kind of a state, but the government never wanted a federal government to be given to north and east, especially if you give like autonomy to the northern region, then there will also be a request by the Muslim majority in the eastern part of the country for autonomy in that region. So this discussion about power sharing has been going on for a long, long time, but even today, when they talk about power sharing, you don't see much political will to devolve power. But right now, because of this 13th Amendment, there is some kind of power given to each provincial council, not only to the north and east regions, but to all the 9 provinces of the country. So there is a separate provincial council that's in charge of the administrative functions of each province. So what the Northern Provincial Council is asking for is something that goes even beyond the 13th Amendment. They're asking for police powers, they're asking for land powers, they're asking for powers of negotiating with international governments. So in that case, there is no willingness by the government to give that kind of powers to the Northern Provincial Council. So the maximum that the government would like to go is what they have given right now. 13th Amendment sans the police powers and land powers. Beyond that, there is no consensus, there is no willingness by the government to devolve power to the northern and eastern provinces.
Any follow-up?
Sort of two-finger to that final response. Am I on? No? Am I now? The little light's on. No? All right. Yeah? Okay, fantastic. So to follow up to that response, when I'm thinking about power sharing, I'm thinking both about devolution of power, as you're talking about here, in an agreed federal framework, and also the integration of people from a variety of ethnic groups into central government power, right? And so better representation for the other provinces within the central government.
So within the Sri Lankan government, there is representation for every ethnic group, because our election system is like a proportional representation system. So every ethnic group in the country is represented in the parliament. There is no problem of representation in the parliament. The problem is only with the northern province, the Tamil community, that they're asking for more and more powers to that particular province. If you look at the demographics in each province, if you take the western province where we have our capital city, you have a lot of Tamils living there. There are Tamils living in the central province. There are Tamils living in the north central province. Like, there are Tamils living everywhere, and they live peacefully with all the other ethnic groups. But if you go to the north, the majority are Tamils. There is like only 1% of Sinhalese living there. There is like about 1% of Muslims living there. And the Tamils do not want to get Sinhalese and Tamils to come and live in the north with them. So it's actually not a problem with the central government. It's actually about the Tamils not willing to give any kind of way for other groups to come and live in their areas and to share power with them in their areas.
All right, thank you for the question, Ambassador Hoover. So you made some good points, and I actually am happy to be the hammer, because I believe in our service. I think that we can do some really great things. However, if you do get a chance to look at my whole paper, I do have several other lines of effort, including commerce to help some of these countries with their economy, Army Corps of Engineers to work on some resilience projects for the infrastructure due to climate change, and also inviting members of their government to attend U.S. programs like CISA. But there is a contradiction, and I struggle with this all year. Why is it that they're doing something that is counter to their ultimate goal, which is to gain influence in Oceania? I found other examples of that. So in Africa, in some of the countries, they may invest lots of money in building roads and bridges while semi-sanctioning illegal diamond mining. In South America, the same thing, investing in ports, while Chinese companies conduct illegal gold mining. So on the one hand, it's like they'll do what serves their interests today, kind of obtusely, it's seemingly counter to their long-term goal. So with the fishing, I think it might almost be at this point like a momentum problem. When you've got 16 to 20,000 boats, you can imagine the number of crew on each of those. They demand, to work, and they're still getting subsidies. There has been some attempts at shaming with very limited success. I think China said, okay, we're not going to take any more squid. You guys are taking too much squid. But they're still allowing it to be sold and processed. So they make public statements, but they don't really follow through with it. And also their fleets operating around the world, including off South America, are becoming more aggressive. And I don't know if that's because members of the maritime militia onboard these ships are seeing what's going on in the West Philippine Sea and mimicking some of those techniques. And it's just, there is a question of how far China is going to push it. You know, will they start using their maritime militia to fend off boarding attempts? And I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out. But you raise a good point, sir, and I never did nail down a solid answer except China does what it wants. So.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for your question. Just a little background about the West Philippine Sea. The West Philippine Sea is almost a little larger than the whole area of the Philippines. So if we lose Philippine Sea, it is sort of saying that we lose almost the same size of what we have now. Scarborough Shoal is also a rock inside West Philippine Sea. And a rock, if you own a rock in the West Philippine Sea or in South China Sea, it follows that you have a territorial sea of 12 nautical miles, if it is above sea level during high tide. So if China will own Scarborough Shoal in the West Philippine Sea, China will have a territorial sea twice the size of Singapore. And China will be inches away from our baseline. The political transition can really impact the continuity of our strategy in the West Philippine Sea. It is one of my identified risks in my paper because in the critique of the government response, I have written that in the three administrations that were previously dealing with this problem, the Aquino administration was the one who filed the case in the PCA, and as we all know, we won the case. But during the Duterte administration, there is like a bromance between him and Xi Jinping. That's why the pivot to China, not only the pivot to China, the implementation of EDCA, which was approved during the time of the Aquino administration, was delayed. The visiting forces agreement was also canceled, and some of your forces went home. And this is all in exchange of some economic favors from China. And during the Marcos administration, there were added EDCA sites to what had been approved by the Aquino administration. We have now a total of 9 EDCA sites in the Philippines to project a strong deterrent posture. And in my paper also, I have identified political will coupled with a strong community or people support and national unity that will strengthen this strategy. This is evident in our current insurgency problem, wherein the political will really made this problem into near extension now, and we can now focus to the external defense. Lastly, I can say that the U.S. coming election also will surely influence our effort in the West Philippine Sea. So, like Ukraine, who is always aiming or hoping for some support, we know that U.S. is solid rock in supporting the Philippines, as well as the Mutual Defense Treaty that we have for how many years. That's all, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we now have around 22 minutes, if my math is not incorrect, for some questions. I would like to prioritize the students if possible, given that we've heard from the faculty already. But Peter, I see your hand. But if you do have a question, please do approach one of the microphones, or indeed at the center of the auditorium here. And if you do not, we will turn it over to Dr. Yeltsev. And if I could ask both questioners and respondents to keep your statements brief, because we're under very limited time constraints. Thank you.
I have a question to the Brigadier General from Sri Lanka. I'm a little bit familiar with this Tamil Sinhala identity, and you have a fantastic idea of creating this Sri Lankan identity, but it seems to me a really difficult task because the Tamil people, and there are 70 million Tamil people in India, a huge diaspora, and they are extremely proud of being Tamil with 2,000 years of literature, statehood, and all of that. When you're talking about the Tamil Ilam, is there a goal today to create some kind of an independent Tamil Nadu just in Sri Lanka, or they are also engaging with Tamil people in India and the Tamil people in the diaspora? Because you're saying to engage with the diaspora, but I think probably many people in the diaspora support their independence movement. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Thank you for your question, sir. Yes, when you say diaspora, I was referring actually to the diaspora in the Western governments, but there is a lot of influence from Tamil Nadu as well. So the good thing is that at the moment, the Indian central government is maintaining a very good relationship with the Sri Lankan government. So at this point of time, since the end of the war, India has been supporting the Sri Lankan government to bring peace to the country without dividing the country. So there is support from India, there is support from even the South Indian government to the Sri Lankan government. They are only talking about unitary state in Sri Lanka, unitary state. The Indian government as well as the South Indian government, state government is ready to see a unitary government where power is shared, power is devolved to the northern and eastern provinces, but within a unitary framework. So South Indian, Tamil Nadu government is not actually, there were discussions like, I have also heard about a bigger Tamil government or Tamil state that also includes northern and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka and Tamil Nadu state in India. But right now, all those like dreams of having a Tamil state in Sri Lanka as well as in India, I think is no more. Because previously in Tamil Nadu, there were politicians like Mrs. Jayalalitha, Mrs. Jayalalitha, and there was like another politician, a state governor in Tamil Nadu, who really supported the LTTE during the height of the war. But now, even the southern politicians are not supporting the Northern Provincial Council in Sri Lanka. They are directly working with the Sri Lankan government to see that Tamil aspirations are fulfilled, short of secession or a separate state.
And just a very brief follow-up, and how is the relations with the Hindutva folks, who some of them, like radical groups of Hindutva, they don't even consider Sri Lanka kind of, they see it as part of India?
We have certain elements of Shiv Sena group in India working closely with some of the Hindu priests in the northern province. But other than that, like we have not seen in the recent past, we have not seen any extremist Hindu groups, working to try and create some kind of chaos in the north and east against the Sri Lankan government.
Okay, thank you.
Unless someone is very shy. Yeah, please, yep. Yeah. Let me see if I can actually get this onto a, there we go.
Thank you very much all for your very good presentation, thought-provoking. A follow-up question to the General. Did you think of maybe a national referendum as not being dependent much on the 13th Amendment that you made mention of, the national referendum about the problem that brings the confidence of everyone in the country as to how the way forward could be?
A national referendum to
the needs of all, that encompass all the needs of all the people from home. So
No.
conducting a national referendum.
No, we have not had a national referendum to address that particular question specifically, but we do have elections every 5 years. We have provincial council elections, we have general elections, we have the presidential election. So I think what is represented in that election is the aspirations of the general public. Now, if you look at the elections that are taking place in provincial councils, always the Northern Provincial Council election, always only Tamils are elected into the Northern Provincial Council. We have never seen any Muslim or Sinhala representative in the Northern Provincial Council. But in all other provincial councils, you have Tamils and Muslims represented, and you have Muslim, Tamil, and all other ethnic groups represented in the parliamentary general elections. And whenever there are elections, presidential elections, the northern and eastern provinces always support one of the candidates, and this particular candidate they are supporting is always from one of the two major parties in the country. So the Tamils always have expressed their franchise to be in the country. They have never said, okay, we want to secede or whatever, but we have not had a referendum just to ask that question specifically.
Thank you, sir.
Presentations, all very good. To our colleague from the DIA, I was wondering if technology transfer is kind of going both ways as far as Iran and Russia are concerned, especially when it comes to one-way attack drones like the Lancet. I was wondering if, through your research, you had discovered any sort of transfer and optimization happening on the part of the Iranian side using those TTPs and any technology transfers from Russia's experience in Ukraine. Thank you.
I'll keep this answer short, partly so I don't go into any classified reporting, but the short answer is mostly no. We haven't really seen any actual transfer of technology, including how to better use some of the drones that Iran has provided. I think that is actually one of the key concerns that we're looking out for the most on both sides, especially to be frank, on Russia's side, being able to transfer better TTPs to Iran, especially as the U.S. and our partners in the Middle East have become better at both counter-drone and other counter weapons measures over the last couple of years. So, yeah.
May just be a quick one, but for Nick and Christian James, both of your disputes are primarily, not completely, but primarily maritime territorial disputes. And I just, especially as we're thinking about what's happening in Sri Lanka, where there's such a deep sort of understanding and defense of someone's homeland. When we get to maritime territories, I was just curious to hear and you have strategic communications as such a part of your plans. To what extent does the public, and the Greek or the Philippine public, to what extent do they see these maritime territorial disputes as sort of existential threats to their homeland? And is that part of your strategic communications? Like, how does that play into your public outreach?
Thank you, Todd. Of course, it's a part of my strategic communication because I refer to the problem statement of the Mavi Vatan is the Blue Homeland Doctrine. This doctrine was crafted by two Turkish admirals, and as you could see on this map of Mavi Vatan, it has, as Turkish, half of the Aegean Sea, including half of the Greek islands of the Aegean Sea. So I think that this is, in my strategic communication, this is a strong part. This is a strong part, because vice versa, Turkey is referring to as existential to threats that they are in Iraq and Syria, and as sovereign rights, the Aegean Sea. So, on the one hand, we have Turkey's sovereign rights, and on the other hand, we have half of the Aegean Sea Greek islands under Turkey. And this is very dangerous, especially before 10 days, a legislation, I think, is going to pass, and they want to implement the Mavi Vatan doctrine in school. Imagine now future military, political leaders in Turkey, and also all Turkish population growing up with these revisionist ideas. So I think this is very difficult. This is a puzzle, and I think that's why I put it in my strategic communication. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, in the case of the Philippines, our people are aware of what is happening simply because it's in the news every day. And this has been happening for so long already, our dispute with China, and we have managed to create strategies already. But of course, again, I go back to the question about the political will, and especially to those people who are affected by China's occupation in the West Philippine Sea, the fishermen and the communities along the coastline of the West Philippine Sea. And our campaign, such as Atin Ito, or in English, This Is Ours, it is a national campaign that we support to create or to make public our efforts and China's aggressive actions in the West Philippine Sea. This is evident also by the support of the people to modernize our armed forces and their acceptance in their communities for the establishment of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the U.S., the establishment of these bases that will support our defense posture. And even the left-wing political people that we have in the Philippines, so our Maoist-inspired, are supporting our campaign against China. So generally, the Philippines is a solid rock in its fight against China. And in the ASEAN, I think it is only the Philippines that stands against China's bully actions in the Philippines, in the West Philippines Sea. Thank you.
I have one question for Brigadier Anton. What kind of approach to facilitate the engagement between the Zot of Sinhalese, Tamil, and others ethnic group? I believe reintegration is a long process, and involving the young generation will benefit in the long run. And when the time comes, they will have a better understanding to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, there are activities that are taking place in the educational sector to get children from northern schools to the southern schools. They make visits, and children from the southern schools are making visits to the northern areas, meeting their people, living for a few days with the Tamil community. Those who are going from the south, they go and stay there. Then we organize a lot of sports festivals, sports activities between northern and southern children. So there is a lot of activities taking place, a lot of engagement taking place between the two communities. At the same time, there are a lot of southern investors that are building schools and school infrastructure. A lot of work is being done to uplift the standards of education in the northern and eastern provinces. A lot of money is being allocated for the northern schools, high schools, and the Jaffna University, which is one of the best universities in the country. So that kind of activities are taking place. There is a lot of hope for the future. Actually, if you talk to the people on ground, the people on ground, they do not actually have this difference with the Sinhalese. The problem is, for us, I think the problem is with the politicians. It is the politicians who actually create this division. Even the politicians, they create this division to gain advantage for their future power hunger, to fulfill their power hunger. Otherwise, if you take the most radical Tamil politician in the country, his daughter is married to a politician from the south, a Sinhalese. So he wants his daughter to marry somebody from the south, but he does not want northern people to live peacefully with the southern people. So that's the kind of situation we have. But we are doing a lot of work to improve the communication between the two communities. Thank you.
I guess you can tell I'm a bit starved for interaction with students on intellectual matters. I embarrass myself. But thank you. I'll try to make it a lightning round of questions. I'm going to leave the poor general alone. He's gotten a good grilling from his classmates, so we'll leave him be. I'll start here on the left. Our colleague from DIA. Excellent presentation on the implications of that relationship for Syria. I would argue as well for the stabilization of Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on and so forth. If you assess Russia's intent broadly as to establish an independent monetary system, energy market, parallel supply chains, these types of things, should those things transpire, of course, they could break Iran's isolation as well, if that relationship is very robust. But what it also speaks to is the importance of Russia, and by extension Iran's, relations with Turkey in the Caucasus and beyond. We've already seen Turkey, Russia, Iran come together and cooperate on economic matters, energy, political matters, security in the Eastern Med, in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, beyond. So I wanted to know how much these other relationships that have indirect but strong bearing on that Russia-Iran relationship, to what extent you looked at that and factored that into your thinking when looking at maybe even asymmetric ways to decouple the Iran-Russia relationship. I'll give you a second to think. Moving down from my left to right, less escalatory. The next questions, if you could, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to focus on how you accounted for escalation. You mentioned it towards the end of your presentations and in some of the Q&A, but I wanted you to come back to it specifically for our Coast Guard colleague, how the optic of Coast Guard vessels would avoid, how you would avoid inadvertent justification for PRC aggression, either in the region or, if you will, elsewhere, which could be claimed as reciprocal action. And it's a similar, again, management, to my colleague from the Philippines, of escalation and risk. I'll come to the next one, and final one. You heard me talking about Turkey in the context of Russia and Iran. Would taking such strong action against Turkey push it farther into the arms of Russia, Iran? Is Turkey too big to fail? With a population more than 50% opposed to its current government, would not such strong action risk alienating the country and that population, and then risk broader strategic alliances such as NATO? Is it, and I would argue, agreements on key issues to Europe, such as Syrian refugees? What other incentives or inducements did you think about to help mitigate that risk, to perhaps hold Turkey closer rather than push it away? Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you for excellent questions. We are at time. We'll go a little longer, but if you could limit your response just to yes, no, or maybe, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. All right. I'll just say very quickly, so yes, Iran and Turkey cooperate, but both, and as you know, are long-term geopolitical competitors in the region. They both see themselves as sort of the regional hegemons in Syria and the broader Middle East. And so I don't see that being sort of an alternative relationship. I think Iran's preferred partner is actually China over anybody, to include Russia, although that presents the U.S. with just the same amount of problems as it does with Russia. India, if I could point to a potential alternative, would actually, as somebody that at least is aligned much more to our interests. India is a major importer of Iranian oil, and the idea of potentially letting India both import more and being sort of an alternative voice to Iran is something I think that the U.S. should maybe consider leaning on a little bit more, but we are not, so I will leave it at that.
Okay, good question, ma'am. So we have seen the Chinese Coast Guard increase in their escalation, although they've stopped short at using deadly force. You know, they're using water cannons, they're ramming, honestly, all things that the U.S. Coast Guard has done, but not typically with people on board. And I think that's the key, is to continue to use our large toolkit. We've got lots of non-lethal methods that we can employ against fishing boats as needed. We, of course, have our guns, but we're never going to use them against civilians. And I think as long as we stay true to that, China watches what we do and they kind of copy it. So I think that's the key, is just stay true to our tactics and you know, our value of human life, and continue to do the right thing.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. With regards to the escalation of China's actions in the West Philippine Sea, we stand on our policy that we denounce war as a form of our foreign policy. And in my briefing, I said that this strategy aims to bring the conflict to peace and not to war. So we continue to leverage our partnership with like-minded nations like the U.S. and other countries to deter or to make China believe that we follow international law. But of course, we continue to do diplomatic engagement with them to be clear that these actions are not provocative in a sense, and we don't intend to escalate tension. So in my paper, I describe, or I write there that we will be open, we will make direct line communications to avoid further escalations during encounters in the sea. So these are now being talked about, and of course we advocate for the COC, or the conduct of code of conduct in the sea, which we believe that it is slow progressing, but we believe that's the answer to the regional problem that we have. And we have the DOC now, or the code between the dispute parties. So we advocate for that, and we have the track 1 or track 2 diplomacy also. So we use that to explain to China that our efforts, like the establishments of some EDCA thing in the Philippines, in EDCA bases, are not just for military but also for disaster response, which we're in the Philippines is always being bombarded every year. We have 30 typhoons every year, so those bases are not just for military but for disaster response and other humanitarian purposes. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councilor Mars. I think there are incentives for Turkey in my strategy. As I mentioned, Greece from 1999 is in favor of Turkey's EU ascension. This is a big policy change from Greece's foreign policy. Another incentive is, as per Dr. Ban's suggestion when I was writing the paper, one option is to pause the time, freeze the time. So, starting from September, we have evolutions. We have 2 meetings between Greek and Turkish prime ministers. 7th of December, the first, 10 days ago, if I remember, the second meeting. So this is advanced diplomatically. Even if I don't agree with the Turkish president's quote that we can speak even if I threaten your sovereign rights. So even if I don't agree with this statement. But according to my estimation, of course there is the quote, the Brzezinski doctrine, Turkey is too big to fail, and we want to keep it close to the West. I think my approach is also this, and I think that Turkey has more to lose not being a member or having a special relationship with the European Union, especially economically. And I'm pointing that after more than 20 years in the district and municipality elections, now it's the first time for AKP party that was second. And I don't mean second in municipalities because they have also a system to vote parties during these elections. It's the first time, and all the polls indicate that it was due to economic reasons. As Mark mentioned in his presentation previously for PKK in Turkey, huge inflation, huge economic problems. So I think that Turkey realizes that it has more to win by staying with the Western alliance than to lose. To close my statement is that the only thing that I suggest is because you are at some time negotiate, because delimitation needs negotiation of exclusive economic zone, to begin from a basis that this basis is what the international law suggests, and not with the basis that I put 5, 6, or 7 extra additional items on the table, and then I say, okay, I took 2 steps forward of the additional, so you take 1 step back also from your sovereign rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Great questions, great answers. It is left for me then to please join me in a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much also to the discussants. I think and to the students who asked questions. Fantastic. I wish also just to express a little thank you on the side. I suspect Ramis, but I don't know who decided to allow me to moderate this session, but it's a wonderful way for me to actually conclude my duties, my official duties here at CISA. So thank you. And with that, please stay seated because we have some closing comments, and then we'll have the gray zone, etc.
Before you sit, Dr. Uko, so we did say most of our goodbyes last time you were in front of the plenary session, but This is your final official duty here, so on behalf of the class of 24, we want to make sure you have some easily transportable remembrances, our ever so classy and subtle class coin, and our legitimately subtle and classy lapel pin that will, you're the first faculty member we've presented one of these to, but something to remember us by in all of your duties. Wish you safe travels and all the future successes. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Sorry. On Tuesday morning, Chancellor Marsh noticed that I wasn't smiling very much, and she called me out and she said, "Nobody looks really happy." Here's the deal, we all look happier now. It's been great watching as everybody going, starting with the first plenary session, as soon as their briefings were done, their questions were over, they were off the X. It was like they grew an inch in height and their soul was 5 pounds lighter. We're done with graded measures, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great time to be us right now. Free your hands for a second. I'm going to speak very briefly, but there's going to be a lot of clapping involved. First off, I want to thank Acting Chancellor Marsh and Acting Vice Chancellor Walker being able to come out here. I know the acting is a very State Department thing to do and say what it is, but you were the adults in the room for us throughout the year, really kind of leveraging everything there. And so while we all have you here, our last time, We want to talk fast now, but we're really going to want to talk fast at graduation and recognition to get back to our families and get on our ways. But just thank you very much for all the leadership you've provided this year. Similarly to the deans in the room, the faculty and the staff, you have coached us over the line, finally. We're through with our graded measures. We know that for many of us, that was a more burdensome task than you might have hoped for in the academic year. But really, just seeing a bunch of mid-career practitioners be led over the line, reintegrated into academia, some of us doing extraordinarily well based on some of the presentations you've seen. Really appreciate all of your efforts at meeting us where we are and getting us to the understanding that you were hoping to see us to. So to all the faculty members and the support staff and the deans of the school, we really appreciate everything you've done for us as well. I'd like to pick out a few people. I'd like to thank our student council members. Again, this is the last chance we're going to be in a room where we can actually say something. Mahmoud and Carson and Ahmed and Anton and Tim, really just extraordinary leadership from our officers, and from Lauren, who is ever present at every sporting event there, making sure CISA was represented and getting us in the door. Jim Thorpe, Chewy, stepping up to be the social committee chair and giving you guys cultural experiences and social events just out of the goodness of his heart and his ability to go overtime and make these things happen. Todd, getting that yearbook put together, the pulling of teeth to get everything out of here so we have a remembrance for us. You guys were the named student officers, and you really did an extraordinary job of leading everybody through this one. So really want to thank you guys and make sure we got one round of applause for y'all for your duties there. And for our seminar leaders, I need you guys actually to please stand up. If Dan Gard, Radu Popa, Nathan McCormick, Kevin Snow, I see you, Travis Bertram, I think he had to leave already. You guys, the number of high churn WhatsApp messages, and we will still probably see at least one uniform change and one reporting time shift before we finally graduate. That is as thankless a job as we have seen folks do, is the seminar leads, really herding the squirrels and making sure that we got everybody where we're supposed to be in one time. Truly, truly thank you. And again, let's talk out to the student body. The cultural, the culture that we have built over the past year. Yu Cheng is actually taking pictures of me right now, and he's going to share those to the WhatsApp page. Miroslav has always had not just questions, but insightful questions when he's gone up there, and he's taken the mic from us in most of our meetings right there. You've got Mark and Lee out on the balcony at 1 o'clock in the morning having deep philosophical debates about climate change. You have so many things that we all know, and every seminar has that own little subculture as well, where you guys have contributed, even if you weren't a named officer, even if you were somebody who just needed to get here, take a knee, do the work, and get back to your family. Everybody contributed to the culture of the class, and it was really an incredible job by all of you, especially those of you who are coming from active conflict zones. We have people here who have family and friends who are still on the X right now. We had Oren actually go back to conflict before returning to us. All right? We have a lot on our plates besides getting over the line and doing our work, and you guys did it. We're over the line now. So last hand is for yourselves. please join me in congratulating you at finishing off our requirements. Well done, y'all. Military members, we have to wear Class A's 2 more times. There's 1 more donning of the CISA Spirit Polo next week. And we have 1 week of showing up on time. That's all we have left before graduation, out processing, getting back onto our lives. Well done. Thank you for getting us here. And mandatory shout out, the gray zone will be opening at 1300. So thank you all very much. Chancellor Marsh.
Okay. Jake thanks me, but yet, he gives a wonderful, wonderful speech, rousing speech, and I'm left between all of you in a well-deserved 3-day weekend. I mean, yeah, it's just tough. So I'm going to definitely try and be brief. Look, truly, you've outlined a lot of what I wanted to say here, but I will have some additional opportunities to talk at all of you. I wanted to thank a few more folks, I know. But prepare yourselves. First of all, Zoe Nelson, who's sitting back there. Thank you for your work on... And we cannot forget Dr. Abbas, who made all of this happen this week, in addition to, of course, all of you. Thank you very much. And again, our colleagues from JSOMA, both the students who traveled up here, and of course, we have Dr. Eltsoff. Thank you very much for coming up and again and taking part with all of us here. Okay. You mentioned relationships. That's our niche here at CISA, right? I mean, you all research, you write, you collaborate, and then hopefully you build these relationships, and then hopefully you maintain them and strengthen them long after graduation. I mean, this is the cornerstone of the strategic advantage we're trying to create here at CISA, truly. In today's world of conflict and competition, constantly changing milieu, right, of frenemies, alliances, partnerships, trying to adapt to this complex security environment, right? Partnerships can be hard. When you have relationships, like the ones you've developed here, it can make all the difference. So congratulations to all of you. Congratulations on the work here, on building these relationships. Keep them going, keep them warm, take them into the future. We're proud of you all. Thank you again. Have a great weekend. You've earned it.